It's time for Gun and Saddle, a United Country M. Edwards Realty and Auction weekly broadcast where we talk about anything and everything related to our God-fearing country lifestyles and the blood, sweat, and tears that it takes to make them possible. Join Monty Edwards and Carrie Hanlon as they take a deeper look at the land we all love and the people that call it home. This is Gun and Saddle.
Here we are again, another week of Gun and Saddle. Hopefully with no technical glitches like we had last week. Although this morning has had some technical challenges.
This morning has been a challenge, period.
I think, we're having this when we started deciding to have this on Wednesday. I didn't think about it being right on Hump Day.
Yeah.
Middle of the week. Weeks are starting to get pretty full.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot of exciting stuff here today to talk about. We won't waste a lot of time. We'll get into our interview that we did today here in just a minute. But I do want to tell everyone to hang on at the end of the show because we have several cool announcements to make about stuff going on in the area and in the community. We're going to have a guest set in with us to tell us a little bit about an event that's going on in the county, in Lamb County. And, Carrie, do you have anything that's going on big that you want to talk about?
Honestly, we do not have a lot going on this week, and it's kind of nice because last week was our homecoming, so it was pretty busy all week long, and so this week we're just kind of...
And it's funny because these towns all around have that on different weeks, and this week is Sudan's homecoming. So, and one thing that I want to encourage you guys to do, which was really cool this week because we had folks reaching out to us that want us to make announcements and do some fun stuff, and that's one thing that we hope this can serve for as a way to get word out if you're having things in the area. And remember, we're going to be bringing on some things over the next few weeks and months where we'll be also going down to our turkey location down in Turkey, Texas. Corey down there and some folks down there. So we're going to also be bringing you some information about stuff going on off the cap. So, well, before we get started, I just want to kind of give you a little intro to what we're about to look at. We're fixing to watch a really interesting interview. One of the things that we deal with in real estate is title and property owner rights. And that's one of the reasons we're bringing this interview that we're having today with Margaret Byfield, Steve Friskup, and Von Box. And they are going to be on this interview with us talking about some things that are going on in the world today that I think people just need to take time to think about. So we look forward to this interview. I think it went pretty well. It's a fairly long interview, but I think you'll find that you'll stay engaged with it because Margaret is kind of coming in as a subject matter expert on this, and we asked her a lot of questions, and she was able to really answer nearly everything that we asked her. So without any further ado, we'll go on into our interview, but be sure to hang on at the end for some of our regional announcements. It's really nice to have this group of people here today for our Gun and Saddle exclusive roundtable discussion about private property owner rights. I want to allow Carrie, before we get started, to introduce our guest. Carrie, if you would you go through and introduce who we have with us today?
Sure. Okay, we have Margaret Byfield. She is from Georgetown, Texas. Margaret was raised on a large cow-calf operation in central Nevada. I was corrected one time on that. Yeah. Purchased by her parents, Wayne and Jean Hagee, in 1978. Her family experienced unprecedented regulatory pressures that eventually led to Hagee versus United States, the first federal lands grazing case filed in the United States Court of Federal Claims. The case was in litigation for 27 years, during which time Margaret launched the property rights organization Stewards of the Range. Stewards merged with the American Land Foundation in 2009, forming American Stewards of Liberty, or ASL. Margaret works directly with policy leaders at the local, state, and federal level, helping to advance strategies that protect the production of America's food, fiber, minerals, and energy. She runs the National Property Rights Task Force and Multiple Use Alliance that confront the agendas eroding property rights in America. She is a national speaker, writer, and commentator on natural resource issues. Okay, we also have Steve Friskup here with us from Muleshoe, Texas. Over the past 41 years, Steve Friskup has traveled all over the United States in his career as a world-famous horse sale auctioneer. On December 3rd, 1995, Steve's life changed forever. While driving home from a horse sale, he had an encounter with God and he surrendered his life to Jesus. This dedication to serve the Almighty God led Steve to lead a Thursday night Bible study that eventually evolved into what is now the Muleshoe Fellowship. Steve has a true love and true hope for this country and a true boldness to go out and share the vision God has given him for the body of Christ in America. For Steve and his wife Robin, the next generation is of the utmost importance. So in that, God has provided a vision, a purpose, and a mission. You may have watched his morning program on Muleshoe Fellowship's Facebook page, Coffee with the Colonel, where he has a loyal following of listeners. And then we have Vaughn Box. Vaughn is out in Crystal City, Texas. Vaughn was raised on the family ranch in South Texas, graduated with a degree in agricultural economics from Texas Tech University, and has always embraced ranching, both as an operator and a marketer of ranch properties. Vaughn is a member of the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association and serves on the board of directors of the Southwestern Exposition and Livestock Show, the annual Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. Vaughn created Box Land Company, LLC, to market ranches from horse and cattle ranches to hunting and recreational properties throughout Texas and the Southwest. He currently resides on the family ranch in Zavala County, Texas.
All right, thank you, Carrie. I wanted to do that just because we've got a good panel here. I wanted everybody to know their backgrounds. Of course, Carrie and I come onto this as host of Gun and Saddle, but we both have backgrounds in real estate and agriculture. And so these issues that we're going to talk about today are extremely, extremely pertinent and important to each one of us, I think. And also I believe that they'll be very important to most of our listening audience out there. So I want to just open up by giving Margaret a chance to tell us about what American Stewards of Liberty is working on now. I know they've got a summit that's coming up in the next few days that's really important, that's specifically dealing with the 30 by 30 initiative. So Margaret, we're just going to go ahead and let you get started. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me and for focusing on this issue. It's one of the most important issues, I think, facing our nation, and we've got a lot of them right today. But the 30 by 30 agenda is, it's not an American-born agenda. It is an international agenda to permanently protect 30% of the world's land and ocean by 2030. So what this means is land that they are setting aside in its natural habitat that people aren't going to be using. No extractive uses, no timber, cattle grazing, any of these uses. These are lands that are going to be locked up, permanently protected for nature, for wildlife. At least that's, what they tell us. That's the propaganda that they use to sell this program. Now, it really had not directly touched America until Biden was elected, and 6 days after he was elected, he initiated this agenda by executive order. So there's no congressional authorization for it. There's no constitutional authorization for it. It's something that he has just done by executive fiat. So what we've had happen since he initiated this agenda is he's used all of the powers that he has, the executive powers and the administrative powers, the administrative agencies, to use the laws that are already on the books and kind of reshape the agenda so that everything is working towards accomplishing this 30% goal by 2030. So it's being done regulatorily on the federal lands in particular, where they're taking the federal lands and basically locking them down tighter, restricting them more so that it'll meet that goal. It's happening on the private lands through the conservation programs that the Secretary of Agriculture has been throwing a ton of money in to get landowners to voluntarily sign up for these programs, which then creates a federal nexus to the lands and allows them eventually to further restrict the private property. And it's being done through conservation easements in perpetuity, on the private lands as well. That's a key tool that they are using to gain that permanent protection and control over the land, which eventually, they can move into that, they can move the land into that category of permanently protected and non-use, which is the ultimate goal.
So, you touched on a lot of things there that I think hit pretty close to home when you start talking about some of the conservation programs. Also, when you start talking about the fact that these things are being done without really any constitutional authority. I would figure we've got a couple of guys in the room and others that might want to make some comments about that at some point in time. But Margaret, one of the biggest things that I think I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about right now, first is talking about how these programs that we're looking at, like the ones that we're already fairly familiar with, may have changed in recent times that maybe a lot of people aren't aware of. You talked about some of the conservation programs. Could you go into a little bit more detail on that?
Sure. So let's look at like the Conservation Reserve Program, where landowners can enroll in the program and set aside their acreage. When the program first came out, which I believe was 1985 through the Food Safety Act, the purpose was for soil conservation. It was to allow those acres that you really couldn't farm, till, use any other way, to set them aside and kind of for soil conservation purposes, erosion purposes. That was really the purpose of the agenda. But it's been obviously used much broader today than it was when it was initiated. So what happened in the Inflation Reduction Act last year? You remember that big act that they put a ton of money into. They called it Inflation Reduction Act. It really should have been called Inflation Act, because that's what it was. It was just a spending bill. What they did in that bill is they took these conservation programs, like the Conservation Reserve Program, the EQIP program, and some others like that, and they actually changed the underlying language, the purpose language for those programs. So before, when you signed up for a CRP program, you knew it was for soil conservation, good water management, good production of the land. That's really the intent of it, and you knew what you were signing. Now, under the Inflation Reduction Act, that language has changed so that the purpose is to mitigate the climate crisis and limit livestock emissions. And also to control agriculture production. So now, they're using the same names for the programs, but now what you are signing up for is to help mitigate the climate crisis and climate change, and to control livestock emissions. And we know where that's going. There's a huge effort to eliminate beef in America and get beef off the menu in America. So all of these things are working together. And I think the real danger is that when NRCS or the federal agencies start talking about this new money from the Inflation Reduction Act, which they started allowing enrollments for last April, or April of this year, I believe. And when they start talking about that, they're not telling the landowners, oh, and by the way, that program you're so familiar with now has a different purpose that you're signing up for. They have new labels for it. It's, climate smart agriculture. It's all these great sounding programs, and which is very troubling because it's very disingenuous on how they have snuck this in, and most landowners aren't even aware of it.
To that point, something that I just, because we live out in the heartland, and just like you understand, because you're working with landowners all over the country. One of the things that I think's an issue that we need to understand is that I think the people that are on the ground that are implementing or helping people sign up for these programs, a lot of them with their head down working, they're still calling it the same thing, and that's what they're getting put forward. They're getting money to help people build things on their property. They're getting money to help re-enlist in CRP. So I think it comes down to this fact that the owners of the land are the ones who need to read their contracts. They need to take ownership of what they're signing up for. And I think we've become so comfortable because, like you said the other day when I heard you talking, they haven't changed these contracts since 1985. So I think that's one of the big things I wanted to get out there today is just tell people you need to read your contract. Because, we have, like you said, there hasn't been this big flashing bullet point that said, hey, this changed, you need to look at it. Although the money came in, we did recognize that there was more money flowing into those projects.
Yeah, and let me tell you one thing that is actually very encouraging. So part of their game plan is to get this new language in the Inflation Reduction Act, which they have accomplished. And all of this has been laid out there was a report that the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis released in 2019. And there's a whole section, it starts about 438 of this report, where they talk about how to implement 30 by 30, the policies they need to put in place. And you can go through that and you can read that and see how many of those they already have in place now. One of those was to change this language behind these conservation programs and to encourage more enrollments. So they've done that. They've done that through the Inflation Reduction Act. The next step, and what they are lobbying on right now to make happen, is to ensure that this new language is the language that is adopted in the Farm Bill, which is to be authorized this year. So the Farm Bill is authorized every 5 years, and it's due now. Fortunately, we've had a really good conversation with Chairman Thompson of the Agriculture Commission, and he's personally committed this 30 by 30 language is not going in the Farm Bill. Good. But the thing that's really great. But the thing that we have to understand is that can get out of control. There's so many competing interests, and particularly on the Senate side, it's going to be very easy for the environmentalists to get that language in there. And then it's going to be a fight of trying to get that language out. And so this is something that I think all the farmers and ranchers and realtors really need to be aware of. This is right now, this moment, this is where that fight is happening. And so everything you guys can do to weigh in with your representatives and tell them, we don't want this language in there. Stick with the 2018 language. We're going to need all hands on deck pushing for that to keep this from going in, because right now the environmentalists still have a tremendous amount of power over Congress. So that's a key thing right today that everybody can pay attention to and start helping us do.
That's a good point. And that's one of the reasons I had a couple of these other guys, and of course Vaughn's already out spreading the message. He was the one that told me about what you guys were working on, and I really do appreciate the fact that he let me know, and today I had with us also Steve. I imagine Steve's, I know he's got some questions for you, but I mean, just to this point that she's talked so far, Steve, this is a lot of what I've been hearing you say too about, it's the time for us to stand up on some of these issues and be heard.
Well, this is a key issue across our country because whether people know it or believe it or not, our land is tied directly to the cause of freedom. As we relinquish authority over our land, ownership over our land, give power to other entities over our land, we also give up our freedom. So every time you sign up for something that has, our federal government tied to it, if it's something that financially benefits you, that's one thing, but if it takes away your freedom or your authority to make a choice or do anything else, then now it's the removal of freedom. And so that's why it's a big deal to me, is because I do understand from the beginning of time how the land is tied to our God-given rights, and which is one of them is freedom. And so, I'm very, very passionate about it. I did want to ask Margaret, though, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the Farm Bill come back up to redo every 5 years? Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So it's due right now. The Agriculture Committee is working on it now.
So,
yeah.
Margaret, not to interrupt, but what happens, because as soon as I leave here, I'm calling my congressman again, and we're going to talk about this. But what happens when they fail to meet the deadline? Is it like our fiscal responsibility that we just kick the can down the road again, or is there a consequence to this? Does something get relinquished in the process financially? Help me understand that part.
Yeah, so typically what they do is a continuing resolution, a lot like they do on the appropriation bills. And I think that Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller, he told us the other day that the 2015, I think it took them 1 or 2 years to actually get passed past the deadline. So the 2015 or 2018 Farm Bill really didn't come into effect, I think, until 2019, maybe 2020. So it's not unusual for this to happen, but it's very possible that's going to happen on this one as well. So that's a good question.
Is that a good thing in light of what's going on with all these changes that are being talked about? Would that be positive? I know there's a lot of negatives about not getting a farm bill passed, but just in light of this one issue.
Well, strategically, if the Americans put more conservatives in the House and the Senate, then it will be better for us.
Right.
But the other question is, how far can we kick the can down before it starts hurting agriculture?
Right.
So, and I know that's certainly something that the congressional leaders are thinking about. But I think right now, really what is important for us to do is not only contact our congressmen, but contact our senators. Because the sooner that we get on this and we make this an issue that they understand there is a strong force behind, that is to our benefit, and we have to do it at every phase, early, middle, late. We have to keep the pressure on them so that when it comes to cutting the deals in Congress, this is one of the things that they side with us on.
Good point. Vaughn, do you have anything at this point you want to ask Margaret before we kind of move into a couple other questions I have for her?
Well, one thing, did the Inflation Reduction Act change the language in those contracts across the nation? I'm supposing it did, but each time one of them renews, is it automatically in this new language?
No, it is language tied to the specific allocation from the Inflation Reduction Act. So that was $20 billion. And you can notice the difference in the language because they will sell the program as climate smart agriculture, good for new industry, new ways to do things. So that this is the contracts that are signed under this language are the contracts that are going to be tied to this language. So just out of that $20 billion. So if you have a CRP that's already in effect prior to that, it's not tied to that language or EQIP or the others. And that's where, so it's kind of like the baby steps, and of getting this put in place. And part of what they're doing, and I've seen their advertising on it, boy, when they sell this program, it sounds really good. I know what it's about, and I read their material and think, boy, this doesn't sound harmful at all, right? So that's what they're doing right now, is they're really trying to sell it, and then they're going to market it to Congress and say, see, the landowners, they're fine with this. And that's what we've really got to be cautious of. They're very, very good at the PR spin on this. But for all future appropriations, if this language gets put in the 2023 Farm Bill, then yes, it will be the language that for every contract there forward at that point will be tied to this language.
And, and that I read some of the things you had on your website. One of the things that really caught my attention was trying to understand this big shift that's part of this movement that's trying to shift the economy into a whole different paradigm. Where these monies that we begin to take for these things that may seem benign at first, it may seem like a good deal. You're getting paid for something that maybe you've already been doing, and you think, well, why not? This seems like a no-brainer. Somebody's going to give me some money, and I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing. I think one of the things that's jumping out at me is that you're going to keep doing what you're doing right now, because you're going to take the money, but then just like when there's new money that comes into an economy, people are going to figure out how to get that money. It's going to change the cost of doing business in that environment, and then it's going to, at some point, even though these are not perpetuity contracts like CRP or EQIP, once you get to a point, it's going to be very hard to step away from them because you're going to need that money. And could you speak to that a little bit, Margaret? And I know you've got a lot more on that than what I'm on there.
Yeah. So, and you're exactly right. I think what happens is when it starts becoming a part of your budget and your operating, it's you find it's difficult to live without it. And so they know. I mean, and this isn't the kindest way to say this, but I think it's important for people to understand that the environmentalists view the conservation programs as the gateway drug. And in this select committee report that I referred to earlier, they say the first step is get them into the conservation programs, then we can move them into the conservation easements in perpetuity, and then we can finally get that final control of the land. So this is all laid out. They're doing it in stair steps, getting this put in place. You know, it's kind of like the frog in the boiling water. You know, you start lukewarm and then you raise it. That's really where they're going. Actually, another person, Roman Balmakov, who will be at our summit, they're releasing the world documentary film that they've done called No Farmers, No Food. And in visiting with him yesterday, he described this as an anaconda. You know, you start getting their arms around with all this money, like an anaconda, and then start squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. And I think that's just a perfect example. Yeah. And let me also say that tying this to what Steve said, he is spot on. We can talk about all the specifics of the mechanics and the way that taking this money may harm you, but the bottom line is, every time we do anything that erodes property rights, we are eroding our individual liberties, and we are reducing our ability to control our government. And not only for us today, but this is the part that I think really concerns me. We're doing it for future generations. You know, we are, especially the conservation easements in perpetuity, we are telling the next generation, we are deciding for them how they will use their land. And there's a concept in law that is that the dead hand cannot control that land. But that's exactly what we're doing with these conservation programs, and particularly conservation easements in perpetuity. And we have to understand that connection. This is much bigger than whether or not we're going to take the funding for a conservation program. This is all about how we are restricting the individual liberties of future generations, of them having the ability to control and limit government over us. From that very critical perspective, which Steve laid out, it's a biblical perspective. And it's something we have to understand, but this is much, much bigger. It's one of the reasons the summit that we have coming up, and for us this whole year, our theme has been land and liberty, because the two are intricately connected. You cannot have one without the other.
Well, Margaret, you mentioned at the start, Margaret, that this was a global initiative. Who started it and when and where?
So this has really been around for at least 30 years. So I don't know if you guys remember back in 1992 when the Biodiversity Treaty came before the Senate. And fortunately, it was Kay Bailey Hutchinson who's the one who walked down on the Senate floor and showed those maps, showing that the ultimate agenda was the wildlands agenda, which was going to move all of the populations into these little core areas with transportation zones to get from, so there'd be, a population zone in Austin, and then there'd be a small transportation corridor where people could utilize to get to Dallas, but all these other lands are going to be wild. So, 30 years ago when this came out, we all kind of laughed and thought, this isn't even possible. Nobody's going to do this. Nobody's going to buy this. But it was in and a part of the 1992 Biodiversity Treaty that the Senate was very close to authorizing, to signing on to. And that included this concept of 30 by 30. So 30 by 30 is really just a new name for that old concept. It's been around for a long time. It's been pushed by the UN and all the people behind that. But more recently, you've had another whole group of people kind of step into the 30 by 30 debate because they realize, alongside of the climate change arguments, this is a great way to convince people that we need to give up our property rights in order to save species and humanity. And that's how they're selling it. So you have big funders of the 30 by 30 movement right now. Bill Gates. These aren't going to be surprising names to any of you. Jeff Bezos. He has his big fund, I think, is it called Earth Fund? I'm trying to remember what he calls it. But he's put a ton of money into implementing 30 by 30 in America and all over the world. And what you have to understand about this whole agenda is it's really not about conservation. I mean, we can talk all day. We know as landowners that if you really want to conserve the land, you keep it private, because then you have a caretaker for that parcel who is making sure that land is always well cared for. If you want to destroy land, then you put it into collectivist control, which is what we're seeing in the West, right? That's why we have all these wildfires. It's because we've had way too many years of federal management of that land. 50% of the West is federalized. So it's not about conservation. It's about power and money. And, my dad said this probably 30 years ago, at least. He said, this whole battle over conservation and property rights in America is not about whether we're going to use the land, it's about who is going to use the land. And right now they are working on clearing the title of the land from the middle class holding this. That's who they're wiping off. They're wiping off the middle class, the small landowners, the family farmers, and ranchers. That's who they're getting rid of. The big corporate entities, they can weather all this. And that's what it's designed to do. So we need to understand that these resources will be used. All these resources they're tying up today, they will be used once they get control of them. It's just us, the people, that they are trying to clear the title from.
That was one of the more shocking things I read in the little piece that you had, or that paper that you had posted on your website about monetizing the air that we breathe. Was that statement that you made in there that said, how will we know if they succeed? And you said when they loose all these restrictions and begin to once again sell all these resources that they tied down with these easements. And that, I know that's kind of a jump for a lot of people to believe that would happen, but you really do have to ask yourself, why is Bill Gates buying all this land? And why is Jeff Bezos investing in all this land? There's a reason, I can promise you.
Yeah.
And
look where they're buying it.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Margaret, but isn't Tom Udall out of New Mexico the first senator to introduce a bill on the Senate floor introducing 30 by 30 as legislation? And he came right out of the state of New Mexico.
Yeah. So I don't know that it was legislation. They did a resolution. So, and I think that's what you're referring to. They did a resolution. There was one in the House and one in the Senate. And it was only co-signed between the two House bodies, only by 15 people. And that, I think, was in 2019. So it still is viewed as a pretty radical idea. But it's like you pointed out, it's who signed that, co-sponsored that, that's important. One of them was then Senator Kamala Harris, now our vice president. So we know she's a huge proponent of 30 by 30. And then, of course, Representative Deb Haaland, who also came from New Mexico, who is now our Secretary of the Interior, which the Interior has oversight and controls most of the federal land in America outside of the Forest Service and the Army. So huge proponents of 30 by 30, and they are in top positions in this administration. Another key thing to understand is there's a report that was written by the Center for American Progress called How Much Nature Should America Keep? This is one of the propaganda pieces that they put out. It really is a playbook to tell the environmental group, this is how we sell this to the American people. This is how we get this implemented. Well, the author of that report is Chief of Staff of the Chairman of the Council on Environmental Quality. He's been in that position pretty much from day one in the Biden administration. And of course, the CEQ is over acts such as the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, most of our environmental policy. So it's a key position for the author of that report to be in, to make sure this is being implemented across the board in America.
Well, one of the reasons I brought that up is because all of us in Texas, I live in Muleshoe, so I'm 15, 20 miles from the New Mexican border. And I spend a lot of time over there speaking and monkeying around in their politics all the time, because I tell them all the time, I want to come over here and mend the fence because I don't want your Jersey Bulls on my black heifers. So we got to fix some of this. But when you see the influx of the Bill Gates and the different ones of that stature buying up the ranches in northern New Mexico, and then you see the government-owned land, the BLM, and then plus the Indian territories on the western side, you see that land grab eliminating our our chance to have a voice on the Eastern Corridor. And then you watch these guys come out of a small state like New Mexico where nobody's paying attention, who still has sanctuary cities and 3 sanctuary counties. These entities are birthing these people who, just like Tom Udall, is now an ambassador over 3 small countries. So the truth of the matter is, he doesn't even have a job. He just gets paid to be up there. But all this comes while nobody's paying attention. You can yap about California all you want to, and New York all you want to, but right here, our next door neighbors has been a birthing spot for this endeavor.
Yeah, it really has, and you would probably know this then, because within the first year in 2021, the New Mexico governor signed an executive order for 30 by 30 to implement it, but her executive order goes further and adds to it, to add to the 30 by 30 agenda another 20% for climate sequestration areas. So another part of this agenda, you have to understand that 30 by 30 is the first step. There is a whole philosophy out there internationally that's called the half-earth philosophy. And they believe that unless we permanently protect 50% of the lands and oceans, then humanity will, of course, be dramatically harmed. So this 50 by 50 agenda has also been rolling through America. And this summer, the state of Vermont passed a law to implement 50 by 50. And when you read that bill, they don't talk about property rights. The only time they talk about property rights is when they say that yes, private property will be included in the 50 by 50 plan. In other words, they're going to acquire it or find some way to control it. But they also, the only other time they talk about landowners in the bill is for landowners' re-education on conservation. They're going to help them learn how to conserve their way. So, we're seeing socialism implemented, and it shouldn't surprise you that Vermont, that's where Senator Bernie Sanders comes from. He's an admitted socialist, so we shouldn't be too surprised at that policy, but you're exactly right. This is really knocking on our door. In the state of Texas, I was very concerned in our first year because there were some of our larger agriculture organizations were saying this won't affect Texas. This is a federal lands issue. It's only going to impact the western states. And I'm thinking, don't tell your members that. That's disingenuous. I've studied this literature. Private property is a key acquisition of these people because they say right now, or when they initiated the agenda, that only 12% of America was permanently protected at that time. So they needed to add another 18%. And along with that, they said only 1% of that 12% is privately owned, and that was a big problem. So they set out a plan to acquire control over more private property, and the 2 great pillars of that were conservation programs and conservation easements in perpetuity. And then the third is federal land acquisitions, which is also happening. But they really need Americans to voluntarily sign up for this program. And so they're using all the propaganda they can and all the money they can to get agriculture to buy into all of this. And we've said from the beginning, if agriculture will simply stand up and say, no, we'll have no part in this entire agenda would die. They couldn't do it without the voluntary acquisition of America's private landowners. And, that gets back to your point. As landowners, we have to decide, is it the money we want or is it freedom?
There you go. It's the Esau story.
Yeah.
Sometimes that bowl of stew gets to smelling pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll end up selling out the whole thing.
Well, and this is kind of a sidebar, but it just triggered a thought in my mind when we went through COVID. We had a lot of people even that lived in the cities that had the right to sell their homes in town and move to the country. And they were able to buy private land. Some of them are still here. Some of them have already decided to go back. But, we had that right. In the state of Texas, we saw a mass exodus of people into this state from other places because of our private property owner rights. So that leads me to this question. Is there anything at the state level, our governor, that our legislatures could be doing to put some safeguards in place that would oppose something coming at the federal level? Is that an area where we need to be working as well?
Yeah, and I will tell you, there are a couple things that would be really good to focus on. Number one is to sunset conservation easements. So right now, those easements that are in perpetuity, that's forever. And conservation easements are fairly new under property law. And so we're just now starting to see the second generation be impacted by these easements. And we get calls all the time from people saying, how do we get out of these? You know, we can't continue to run our operation under this archaic plan that our family signed up for and put a management plan in place and signed a contract on 30 years ago. Things have changed. And so we're seeing a lot of that now. But here in Texas, so that's one thing, is sunsetting conservation easements. A 20-year term would be probably the top. We've said 30, mainly just because to get people to understand we've got to put a term on this, and there's a lot of people afraid of doing that. They don't want to come up against the land trusts on this. And so, but really it needs to be shorter than that. The second thing that is really important to advocate and that the state could do is the state could require that there can be no conservation programs, conservation easements, federal land acquisitions in any county that already has 15% or more of their land encumbered with these devices, or any other device that reduces the taxable base. Now, the reason this is important is because when a conservation reserve program goes in, you're taking land out of production, so you've reduced the productivity that's coming off of that land. You reduce the revenue to the local government. You put a conservation easement on, you reduce the revenue. You reduce the taxable value. The state of Nebraska Department of Revenue did a study, and they looked at all of the wetland reserve easements that NRCS had put in place in that state, and they found across the board it reduced the value of the property by 40%. You take federal land ownership of any land, and it is not taxable. So the federal government doesn't pay property taxes. That's one of the big problems with the West. 50% of the West is owned by the federal government. They have a major problem keeping those local economies functioning because they don't have that tax revenue off of their land. So one thing that we have put forward is there should be a 15% threshold. So once a county hits that 15% threshold of not having taxable land, that land off the books that they can't tax or it's reduced, then there should be no more of those programs placed into that county. And that's one way to kind of, what you're doing is you're not preventing people from doing it, but you're limiting the local impact so that it doesn't dry up communities and put the additional pressure on the other landowners that live in that community as the tax base drops with that percentage. And that's another thing that we're advocating. And actually Representative Hagman from Wyoming has submitted legislation to the Farm Bill exactly along those lines and related to the conservation easements in perpetuity, so that the federal easements then will have to be sunset. They can't be in perpetuity, and they can't be put in place in any area that already has 15% of their land encumbered in any county. So she's already advanced that in Congress at the federal level. The state can advance that same concept here, and it's something we should think about. The other thing that we should talk about that Texans need to be aware of is there was a major attempt in the last session to take $2 billion of our rainy day funds and put them into a trust for the purpose of purchasing conservation easements in perpetuity in Texas. That was a bill that was advanced by Representative Holland. Now we heard about it a couple days before the committee hearing, and we put out an alert to our Texas people, letting them know. And so a firestorm was stirred up, thankfully. My husband Dan Byfield, who's C of O American Stewards was the only person who went in and testified against it. Representative Holland was livid because they had had way too many phone calls and they thought they were going to get this done quietly. It was supported by over 50 agriculture, environmental organizations, very quietly. Fortunately, the House sponsor of the bill decided not to advance it. She listened to the people and went, wait a minute, I didn't understand what this was about. I thought this was just about conservation. And so she backed away from it. So even though the bill passed the House, thankfully it didn't advance in the Senate. They are going to be back with this bill in 2 years. And, we have a window of opportunity to educate people on conservation easements in perpetuity and how that destroys the property value and how it transfers control of the property, which is the fundamental element of property, to the land trust or the federal government, which means it's no longer private property once you put it into a conservation easement. We have, those couple of years to really educate Texans on this, but they are coming back for more money. They want taxpayers to pay for the removal of our private property rights through these conservation easement programs.
That's just a lot to digest when you sit and talk about it in that framework, but understanding now that you know what the fight is and you know the points. I mean, that's the point we wanted to have today, is to just get people's minds thinking about these things where they could ask more questions. And your upcoming summit, I know it may be short order for some folks to get there, but there's still some ways people can support it. I'll give you just a second to talk about that, Margaret.
Yeah, sure. So this will be our second National Stop 30 by 30 Summit. So we did, the first one was last year, and Governor Ricketts of Nebraska was our host of the event. And he's now Senator Ricketts. So he's been a big help to us back in DC as well. And this year's summit host is our Agriculture Commissioner, Sid Miller. And he's been fantastic. I really have gotten to know Sid a little bit closer now through this summit, and I'm really impressed with how deeply he cares for the people, how deeply he cares for the property rights, and he is very concerned about this agenda, this 30 by 30 agenda, getting its hooks into Texas. So we're very thankful that he is hosting this for us. It's a 2-day summit. It is. We open up on Thursday with just a welcome reception, but the meat of the program begins on September 22nd and 23rd. We have some great people coming in to speak. A former director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service under the Trump administration, Aurelia Skipwith. Mark Morano, if you watch Fox News or any of the major cable networks, you'll see Mark Morano all the time. He wrote the book, The Great Reset, Green Fraud. He's a huge, one of our real intellects out there, always fighting this climate crisis narrative in the press. And we have a whole bunch of other people that are coming in. It's a fantastic group of speakers. But the other thing that we're doing is Epic TV is launching their world premiere of the film I talked about earlier, the No Farmers, No Food. It's a fabulous documentary. And what they did was that they went to the Netherlands, to Sri Lanka, they interviewed landowners in America, and they took a look at what is happening worldwide to our food system, and are telling the story of how worldwide it is the small landowner that is being forced off the land. And it seems very coordinated, very deliberate for a particular purpose. And so that documentary is really, really well done. We've seen the rough cut. It's fantastic. So it's kind of a nice thing to be a part of. They'll be doing that Friday evening at the summit. They're going to do red carpet interviews. So that'll be kind of fun for our people to come in and get interviewed by Epic TV and then show the film. And Roman Balmakoff is the host of Facts Matters for Epic TV. And he is the host of this, the interviewer of this program, this documentary. And so he will be there speaking as well. But you can still purchase tickets. You can purchase one for the full summit, which is $275 for the full summit, or you can purchase a dinner ticket and just attend the premiere, which is $125. And then the hotel actually extended the room reservation, our room block. They don't have any more hotel rooms available, but they extended ours. So you can still, up till Thursday, you can still get a hotel room at $149 a night, which is fantastic in Dallas. It's Irving, Texas, right next to the airport, so it's pretty convenient to get in and out. But it's going to be just fantastic. Stellar group of speakers. You will learn a lot. It's not only people speaking to you, but there are workshops and trainings, and it's strategy. It's about how we stop 30 by 30. So it's just a really neat group of people that are getting together, that are the local leaders, state leaders, federal leaders fighting this agenda.
And I wanted to mention that I put links for the summit and for y'all's website, Margaret, in the discussion or in the body of the description for these posts on YouTube and Facebook. So if anybody wants to go to those, if you have any other questions, you can send us an email at comments@gunandsaddle.com. When we run this tomorrow, because this is going to be a pre-recorded interview, we will, at the end of the show, we always put up that email address, so we'll show it again at the conclusion of this broadcast. But, I think we could sit and talk for hours about all this, and I'd like to see if I can get you to promise that you'll come back and let us continue this discussion at a later date after the summit.
Oh, absolutely. Happy to do it. And thank you all. I mean, I'm glad you had Vaughn on. Vaughn's been a huge proponent of helping us get the message out on this agenda. And it's great to meet you, Steve and Carrie, as well. Yeah, happy to do it.
And Vaughn, before we go, since you did help me get this set up, did you have anything else for Margaret?
No, I think I'd just make the comment that the people that are trying to impose this on us are extremely patient, they're persistent, they're pervasive, and they're very deceptive. And I think they've lulled us into a lot of complacency, and it's time that we wake up and take action now. And I really appreciate what Margaret and Dan are doing.
I do too. Thank you guys for that and your dedication. Steve, you got anything else before we go?
God bless you, Margaret. Keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Come to Mule Shoot.
Yeah.
Love to.
Well, we appreciate you being on, and like I say, we'd like to have you back in the near future, and thank you, each one of you guys, for being on this panel. Well, listening to that again, doing the interview yesterday, I had a lot to think about all day yesterday. How about you? I mean, it was interesting.
Yeah, and I'm probably like a lot of people, don't really know about all that stuff, so it was really informative to me. I will tell you one thing I took away from it, and that's probably, we need to know what we're signing. Mm-hmm. It's very important.
We preach that a lot amongst realtors, and it's a struggle because people, in one way they work with people they trust, they put stuff in front of them. A lot of people around here, we work on handshakes and covenants and all, but what you got to recognize in the world is that people will put stuff in front of you sometimes, and it is your job to read it. And when things change is when it'll get you. I mean, when situations change and then you make assumptions, really nobody's told you that it didn't change. They put a new piece of paper in front of you to sign it.
Right.
And I think one of the other emphasis that we need to understand from this, and I hope this came through in that interview, is this is a top-down issue. This is coming from the top. So, we're kind of in the bottom. We're on the ground level. And so, like she mentioned a few things and a few key takeaways, talk to your senators. Talk to your senators, because that's where the first part of this fight is right now for this new Farm Bill language. And I think what we need to understand is that that's such a critical thing, because if they get this Farm Bill passed, it can come through the Senate or the House. But if it comes through the Senate, that's a much smaller group of people to reach out to and talk to about this. So if you don't know who your senators are, your federal senators or your national senators, find out and bring these issues up to them. Call in on those lines that they have that are available and make it a point to bring that up, because what they do is they screen. They look through all those calls, and if these issues keep coming up, that's the stuff that they start paying attention to. And so don't think that your voice doesn't matter. That's why Margaret and people like her are out there telling people and wanting to get the word out about things, because we live in a great country where if people will be vocal and use the rights that our country recognizes that we're born with, that we have representation. So, cool thing there about that. Another key takeaway that I took from it was that we need to, when we're looking at these decisions we're making about where we take money, we need to look at is this going to change the way that I'm trying to run my operation? What are the long-term impacts, not just the short-term? Because it's real easy to just get caught up in getting through this year. But look at the big picture things about what is this going to do in the industry, because you may think that you can't make a difference, but if everybody thinks that way, then they're right. So anyway, it was very interesting. I appreciate so much that Steve and Vaughn and her were willing to come in and spend that time with us. We certainly hope to continue to bring you things like this, in additional weeks and months. And if you've got issues that you think are pertaining to our area and our region that you think would be interesting to people or that people need to know about, reach out to us and let us take a look at it and we'll see if we can get you on the show. We've got some announcements that we're going to do here in a minute. We have a person that's going to be with us here in just a few minutes to make some announcements about an event that's going on in the county. But while we're waiting on that, I thought we'd let Carrie talk to you a little bit about some stuff. Last week, Littlefield was having their homecoming. This week, I know Sudan is. And I apologize if anybody else is and we don't have them on here. But we did have some folks from the homecoming committee here in Sudan reach out to us and ask us to make a few announcements.
Very good. It looks like y'all have a lot going on. First thing I'd want to mention is looks like the junior class is having a homecoming pregame meal. It's Friday, September 15th, and they're going to serve that from 4:30 to 6:30. You said, I think, out at the cafeteria, it'll be $10 a plate. Looks like they're going to have grilled burgers, chips, homemade Texas sheet cake, and you get to your water. Cake sounds pretty good.
That sounds pretty good right now, doesn't it?
Yeah. And then it looks like on Saturdays, when all of y'all events are over here, looks like y'all are going to have a parade, and I guess y'all have lots of vendors that set up out here. There's going to be a volleyball tournament, a coin dig, that sounds pretty fun, a car show, and then a street dance. Y'all finish it up with the street dance, so y'all do the whole shebang.
Yeah, we got lots of events here, and like we were saying, we've got copies of this. If you need info, I think you can get in touch with some folks. I know Lacey Magby is one of the key people that's working on this, but there's a lot of other people helping as well. She wouldn't want me to say she's the only one working on it, but we did get this from her, and we do have this. We will be glad to share with you any of the other date times for any of the events. Also, that same day, I had one particular class that reached out to me and asked if we can make some specific announcements about some things they have going. And it's the class of 1973, which will be having their 50th class reunion. And they're going to meet at 10 a.m. in front of the elementary because they'll have a float for everybody that's there to ride on. And then at 6:30 Saturday, September 16th, that class and any guests that they have will meet at Loco's in Littlefield, and they're going to have dinner. They're all going to meet there and have a meal. And then following that, they will all go over to Gary and Cece Edwards' house, which they live in Littlefield, I think right off Farwell Street. Right. And they will have dessert and time to visit and hang around their house. They wanted me to announce that they're going to have a few special guests from their growing up, some coaches. They're going to have Coach Mitzi Trussell Johnson, Coach Jim Warren, and biology teacher Ronnie Dunaway. So,
there you go.
Kind of cool that they're doing that. This is what we want people to do, is tell us about things that are going on. And we're not going to tell you, we're going to be responsible for making sure we put everything on here. So, it's up to you. Let us know. If you got something going on, we'll be glad to make those announcements. And like I say, hold on here at the end because we're going to have a really important announcement about the ranch rodeo that's coming up at Earth this weekend. Rex Fennell's going to join us here in a few minutes to tell us about that. But while we wait, I thought it would be a good time to do our favorite part of the show, the trivia section of our show. I went and found some really good trivia questions. We're having a little bit of technical issue, I think, with the comments coming through, but if you're on Facebook, we can see those. We're going to ask these questions, so if you think you know the answer, be sure to join in, and we'll see what see if you're right. But the first trivia question, we'll have 5 again today. I was going to have a drum roll sound effect so we could do that, but I didn't have that ready. But the first question number 1, what is the name for the Jewish New Year? I'm going to give you some choices here. Is it A, Hanukkah, B, Yom Kippur, C, Kwanzaa, D, Rosh Hashanah?
Sorry, it just made me think of the TV show.
What's my Jeopardy whistle?
What was it?
Rosh Hashanah was option D. C was Kwanzaa. B was Yom Kippur. And A was Hanukkah.
It's Rosh, was whatever you said.
So you say D?
Yeah,
Rosh
D.
Hashanah? Carrie?
I have no clue. I'll go with Hanukkah.
Hanukkah. It was D, Rosh Hashanah.
You see her location again?
Yeah, we're gonna.
I'm not even looking at the paper. One,
This has been an
Kwanzaa-
ongoing complaint.
Kwanzaa is not Jewish, and neither is Yom Kippur.
I think Yom Kippur is actually.
Is it?
I believe. We won't get.
Well, I
we
didn't
won't
think Yom
get-
Kippur was
Yeah,
Jewish.
no clue.
So we'll keep moving. Next question. Okay, this one's an easy one. How many blue stripes are there on the U.S. flag? A 6, B 7, C 13, or D 0?
C. No, wait. Oh my gosh. There's no blue stripes. It's 0.
Y'all caught it. I tested this on some other people and it worked. It was a trick question. The correct answer is D 0. The number one answer for most people if they miss that is 13.
Because wasn't there 13?
There's 13 stripes on the flag.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Trivia question. Which one of this is actually going to be one Maddie will probably get in here and say, I have no idea, but it was just in the rotation. So, which one of these characters is not friends with Harry Potter?
Oh, I thought I was going to get this.
Is it A, Ron Weasley, B, Neville Longbottom, C, Draco Malfoy, or D, Hermione Granger?
Oh my gosh, it's Hermione.
Hermione.
I
Well,
don't know how to say it.
I've
looks like
never
her.
watched anything Harry
I'm
Potter
gonna
in
let
my
you
life.
pick
You can have
first.
it. I don't have a
Oh,
clue.
okay. It's Draco. It's Draco Malfoy.
so what do you say?
I'm going with her.
Good idea. Okay, that is correct. Okay, it is Draco Malfoy. I know that's probably not very interesting to a lot of folks. Okay, next question.
Shonda, wait, I've been busy answering questions. She did say D on one of the answers. I'm not
Okay,
sure
well, it was
which
probably on the flag. We're
It's
going to give her
probably
credit.
the
Or it
flag.
could be D on the first one.
one. Could be.
You need to pay attention to those answers there, Maddie. Okay, so question number 4. This is a good one. What is the color of Donald Duck's bow tie?
Donald Duck's bow tie.
Yeah. Is it A, red, B, yellow, C, blue, or D, white?
Donald Duck's bow tie.
Is he like a white duck?
Bow tie?
Yeah, what is the color of Donald Duck's bow tie? A, red, B, yellow, C, blue, or D, white?
I'll go blue. No
I'm
clue.
going to go blue, B, blue,
I'm going
C, blue.
yellow.
You're going to go B, yellow.
Or is it
Rex, you just joined us, but you got a clue on what Donald Duck's bow tie?
Black.
Okay, well, the correct answer is A, red.
Oh, there you go.
So, you know, I had it pictured as yellow in my mind too. I don't know. So anyway, but okay. So our last trivia question. Did we have anybody out there that got that on the comments?
Nobody commented on that one.
Okay,
I don't
we're
think
look-
anybody knows.
I think
what
we're losing everybody on our trivia this week. Okay, what was the name? Now, Rex, you may know this. What was the name of the band Lionel Richie was a part of? Was it A, King Harvest, B, Spectrums, C, Commodores, or D, the Marshall Tucker Band?
I said Commodores.
I think it's C.
C, Commodores?
I'm going C. I know it's not D. I'm going
Well,
C.
smart to go with them. It was C, the Commodores. So good job. Okay. So we're if you notice, this is kind of the magic of broadcasting world. We poofed Rex into his chair here. But we got him here today, and I wanted to give him an opportunity. He told me yesterday he was able to come over for a little bit and tell us they're working real hard to get ready for the ranch rodeo that's coming up this weekend. And it's a kind of a multi-part event, isn't it? Because you've got 2 different parts of it. I mean, as far as in there, a junior aspect.
There is. We have a youth, which will be Saturday at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
And it's a youth rodeo.
Okay.
And whoever wins that will go to the finals in November. I think it's the 9th through the 12th, something like that. Never know. So.
Am I wrong about this, or was the team that won at Earth last time the one that actually won on the junior
They did.
I thought that I remembered that.
Yeah, they won last year. The team that won ours won the finals. I'm pretty sure that's
I
right.
think that's right, because Rachel Myers and some of those, wasn't that there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that group that came out of Claude. So, okay, so tell us a little bit about what to expect. What's going on Friday at the
Basics rodeo starts at 7 o'clock. Of course, it's the normal events they have at the finals, but you know, it's a ranch rodeo, and we'd like everybody to come out and watch it. It's pretty good.
So for some of the folks that maybe went to rodeos over the years, and when you say ranch rodeo, they don't really know what is the difference. I think that's a question.
Well, we don't have like the bronc ride and the barrel racing. I mean, we have the bronc ride, not the bull ride and all that. So basically, we'll have like a team branding, a doctor, which they're going to roll 2 steers out. The branding, they're going to roll kids, drag them out. We will have bronc riding to one of the main events. It's first and last event of the rodeo.
Okay.
We have wild cow milking, so
okay.
it's more of a fun type rodeo. You know what they do on the regular day-to-day ranch. So as far as doctoring and all that.
So I know you got a lot of different ranch teams coming in. Any of the big ranches people would recognize bringing teams.
460s will be here, King County.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Dixon would have been here, but they qualified in Amarillo this weekend. So, you know, we have a bunch of them that qualify. That once they qualify, then they're going to the finals, and you know they don't want to enter in case somebody gets hurt or something. So.
Sure. Yeah, because that's a good point. I mean, these for the most part, these are the real deal, aren't they? I'm not saying that the pro rodeo guys aren't good at what they do, but I mean, these guys are guys making a living.
Yeah, they're doing what they make a living, and this is just kind of a perk of working on one of the big ranches or whatever. So it's they all really enjoy it, and it pays pretty good. You know, if they win, they get to the sanctioned rodeo. If they win in Amarillo, well, the payout and prizes are real good. So.
Am I wrong in this too, saying that I mean this is kind of the hub and center of the ranch rodeo world? I mean, right here in Amarillo is.
I mean, we're going to have. I believe we've got 5 states represented in our rodeo. And there's a lot of times at the final they'll have between 5 and 8 states. So it's spreading out. It's really got big in the last 3 or 4 years. So Lehman, he kind of runs the office up there, and I talked to him. He said that Friday is sold out in 4 hours.
Wow!
No, the Saturday night performance sold out in 4 hours.
Oh,
it
wow!
was pretty quick. So
Well, in one aspect of this, I mean, we've been a sponsor over at the Clovis Horse Sale for the last few years, an event sponsor for that event that comes up in February, but we set up a booth there 4 times a year. But one thing that I've seen are these folks that do well at these ranch rodeos, there's a commonality between the same folks, a lot of them that sell some of these horses in these regional horse sales like the Clovis Horse Sale.
Yeah, in fact, we've had a horse sale that they did at the finals, and it really went good. Had top-notch horses up there. So, in fact, Steve, he auctioneered it for us that year.
Steve did.
So it's a really good deal. But I mean, they're back when I was doing it, well, it's a lot different in the quality of horses that come to these events.
Yeah, the quality of the horses in general is just pretty outstanding nowadays. So you may have said this already because we got a lot going on here. If you already said this, I beg your pardon, but did you tell us yet what it costs to get into the gate?
It's $10 for adults and $5 for kids, and then of course the child gets in free if they're not in school.
And then time again on when it starts on Friday.
The open night is 7 on Friday night and then 7 on Saturday night. The youth will start at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning.
So you got sandwiched between the 2 adult deals at night. You got that youth event. And I drove by there last year when y'all were having that. I mean, it was crowded.
It draws more crowds sometimes in the open,
Yeah. We tell you a little funny story on that. We were actually trying to round up a big group of cows that we brought in last year, and we didn't have enough help. And we couldn't find any help. We figured out because y'all was having that ranch rodeo. Everybody was at the ranch rodeo. Couldn't get any day workers that day. So
everybody shows up. It's the kids. I mean, you got their grandparents coming and watching all that, so the crowd's really good on the kid deal. So.
Well, and one of the things about what we're doing here is Gun and Saddle. We like to talk about the area here that we live in and all the things that are going on. But I mean, if you really want to get a sampling of what West Texas life is like, and the people that live here, come to that ranch rodeo.
Yeah, come to the ranch rodeo, or come to the one in Amarillo. I mean, that's the ranch life. You're gonna see ranchers, you're gonna see cowboys. Not that they're just general all around people. I mean, you gotta go rope one, they go rope it. If you gotta go ride a bronc, they ride a bronc. So they're just general all around.
Well, in the last few years, we've seen this resurgence in interest in ranch life and all. I think there's some of the big things that are on TV and all, but I mean, this is really neat to see it really in front of you. And see them doing that real world activities out there in the events that they do. So, well, we didn't really have anything else after that. We wanted to get you in and do this. We're going to keep rebroadcasting this throughout this evening, and it'll be available on YouTube and on Facebook. You can go back and watch this once we're done posting the live video. I would encourage anybody, if you missed the interview that we just had with Margaret Byfield and Steve and Vaughn Box, I would encourage y'all to go back and listen to that. It was very interesting, very stimulating, get your mind thinking about some things. But thanks for being with us, Rex.
Appreciate you inviting us.
And guys, we look forward to getting y'all back on here next week. We've moved the interview that we're going to do with Jason Gandy with Capital Farm Credit. He should be in here next week talking to us about some of the loan programs that Capital has, some of the things that they're doing right now to try to work around these. I mean, they can't stop there being high interest, but they've got some pretty cool products that have some features that I think y'all will find interesting. So we'll have them back next week. If you have any questions or comments, we're going to put our email up at the end. But thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week on Gun and Saddle.
Thanks for watching Gun and Saddle, a United Country M. Edwards Realty and Auction weekly podcast. Have an idea for a future episode, comments, or suggestions? Email us at comments@gunandsaddle.com. Remember to subscribe or follow us today. Join us again next week for a deeper look at the land we all love and the people that call it home. This is Gun and Saddle.